GM, trade of the day. So, wanted to look at Bitcoin reaction after liquidations. So, what I've done is I've marked every liquidation that is the size of Monday's. So, 130 million roughly. Every liquidation that was the size of Monday's or greater over the past few years, and marked them all out. So, I've got the arrows here for each time, marking the first time it hits. And as I got back to 2021, I realized just how crazy the last bull run was. And really, so I haven't counted anything after July. I only started counting after July because there was so much leverage in the system here that look at the blue line. The blue line is our biggest liquidation, right? Right now, if you zoom forward to the present, the blue line is like a big liquidation. The only one bigger, noticeably bigger, was August. And we struggled to ever get above 200 million basically in a day, except for that one, which went to 300. You go back here, like that's just like a normal day. That happens on green days. Wild. This fucking market was so crazy. And it's impressive that Bitcoin is up at these levels without that level of interest, because this might look mad, like crazy liquidations everywhere, but what this indicated, the market was so active. There were so many people trading. There was just so much activity. And there's nowhere near the levels yet. And people are like, oh, that means we're not at the top. You know, we haven't peaked yet. We don't have retail back. We don't have mania. And yeah, that very well may be true. I just don't think we ever get back to this kind of craziness. 3 billion liquidations just on Bitcoin. You know, fucking 2.1 billion. A billion. A billion. A billion. How many times? Like, it's savage. It's insane. So not worth counting those, obviously, because you're basically counting every single day. So like this 130 million, and the point I'm making is 130 million didn't class as a big liquidation back in 2021. So after the massive wipeout after China, I think that's when it really shifted. That's when the market changed. And as you can see, we had several of these events, okay? So I've marked them all out. And looking on the chart here, because what I'm trying to look at is, you know, what do we got anything we can read into here for Bitcoin over the next few days. So when we have these big liquidations, how long does it take for price to close back above? So 37 days. So from the liquidation candle, it took 37 days for price to close again above. Back here in March, it was 6 days. Further earlier in March, we still haven't closed above it. So that one's still open, 104 days and counting. 6 days. We have 64 days from the big flush in August. We have 67 days from the FTX collapse. We have 270 days from one of the Luna collapse levels. We have over 500 days here. We've got 14 days, 82 days. We've obviously got some that have extended throughout the entire bear market, 800, 800, 800. We had a couple in the middle of the last bull, 11 days and 29 days. So what this tells me is when we have a liquidation of the magnitude that we saw on Monday, we have never reclaimed that daily high within less than 6 days. 6 is the lowest, right? 6 days happened a couple of times here. One of them was a flush shakeout, we go higher. The other one was a liquidation event into the lows, and we push back up. So we're only what? 1, 2, we're on day 3. So that's one way of looking at it. And this would tell me to expect some kind of, you know, consolidation and chop. And how often does it go lower before it goes higher? Right, so here, we went down, liquidation candle. It went lower before it reclaimed. So you had a second push. Basing that on the fact we haven't had a second push yet in this current. We had the liquidation candle here. We pushed down the following day, and then it consolidated. Obviously, these ones just led to more downside. So there was no bounce, no bounce, no bounce. And this is important because when you see people talking about it, they're like, oh, we're overdue a bounce, big liquidations, it's got to rally, you know, squeeze it up to 65, squeeze it up to 70. But people were saying that over here as well. Weakness can just be weakness. Same thing happened in January. There was no bounce. It was straight into new lows. Then we did get one. So it pushed down, went lower, lower, and lower. So it pushed lower the next day and swept lower a couple of days later. And then we rallied up and reclaimed. Obviously, the January one was lower, and then several, you know, swing levels lower. These were obviously during a bear market. It is important to differentiate. May, June, obviously just went straight lower. Then we started to get back into our bullish market. So here's where the data becomes, I think, more relevant to our current phase. And so it collapsed in November. The very next day it went lower, and that was it. It went sideways for about a week or two, briefly touched off the lows, and then, 67 days later, we went back above. This one here is a good example. Flush down lower, chopped within that range 4 weeks, had a spike up, rejected, dip lower, held 64 days later. And you obviously have the quick flush out at the highs. That was when we were fully, though, in a bullish uptrend, so it's not the same. This was in the beginning of a downtrend, so that's an interesting one, yeah. Dipped all the way down, reversed it, held, moved back up. And then we had this one here. So we had 13th of April, big collapse, grind, took out the lows, bounce up, took out the lows again, so it went lower. So you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, well, what's most likely here for BTC? Is it more likely that we push up to 64, in the next day or two and have a strong candle close up there? Well, history would say no, that almost never do we get that. We have had it, obviously, a couple of times recently, so maybe there's something there where the market dynamics currently are. If Bitcoin pushes down into this area here, we could see, a strong reclaim. But remember, all those just pushed into lower highs anyway, so we'll see how it goes. I could see that. But I think that because of the nature of the market, when people get taken out and they get liquidated, it removes people, right? Open interest gets wiped. People get liquidated forcibly, and they're gone from the market. That takes people out of the market. That's generally not a good thing. That's why it leads quite often to some of these choppy consolidation phases, because the market has to build itself back up and find, it has to, let's say, go into a cause and effect phase and build itself back into a bullish structure, bullish setup. So looking at that for BTC, I think it's quite clear that probably we're in for more of this grinding chop. I think if Bitcoin is able to make its way back to 62k and is able to hold up there, then that's, a good start. But otherwise, I don't think there's going to be a trade today. Hence why I'm doing this little study instead of trade of the day. I don't see, an obvious trade setting up, as Bitcoin is just grinding down near the lows, not showing much impulse. Any rally up probably caps it up at 62, and I just don't see. I see equal possibility for it to go lower or higher from here, as it's just having this, tiny low range candle. And so I think you want to wait. If you look at some of these post collapse levels, like over here, after you have the big liquidation, you have a lot of really bad trading day candles, right? Chop before anything decent happens, like 2 weeks later. And so quite often the worst time to trade is right after one of these moves. And so that would be, roughly how I'm viewing it. So that's it. GM. See you later on the altcoin request stream. GM.